So I get behind my rifle and I look through the scope and I have my crosshairs on him. And my whole world basically is in the middle of my crosshairs. I took my safety off and I started to squeeze the trigger to release that slack. That's something that sticks with you. That's something that you just don't shake off. And that's something that follows you home. It gets into your dreams.
We know that from 2001 to roughly 2021, we had about approximately 3 million American service members who served in the theater of combat or war. That is from the Gulf through Iraq into Afghanistan. But what happens to those individuals who served, who experienced the horrors of war, what humans should not have to endure? We as a nation spend a lot of money in training them up and preparing them for combat. We know our country, the United States of America, without doubt has one of the best armed and best trained armed forces on the globe. But how much do we spend on their transition? So today on Bets and Badges, I've got the pleasure and honor of introducing to you Chris Wiacek. He is a combat veteran who served, amongst other places, in Iraq, Afghanistan during that time period. So, Chris, you are a part of a documentary that I've had the honor of working on for the last year, calendar year. It is the story of members of Thunder Platoon who served with the 37th Armored Division, the Bandits, during the second battle of Ramadi. 2006 to be exact. A period of time and a location of war that intelligence reports basically deemed a dead zone for troops. Chris and his platoon mates who are in this film have spent the last 20 years dealing with those experiences. It is titled Out of the Fire into the Light. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Chris Wiacek. I was an infantryman in the United States Army from 2001 to 2009. I separated from the military at the rank of staff sergeant. My duty stations included the 3rd Regiment U.S. Infantry, the Old Guard, the ceremonial unit in Washington, D.C., the 1st Armored Division, 37th Armored Regiment in Freiburg, Germany, and 1st of the 506th of the 101st Airborne Division in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. During that time, I was deployed to the Horn of Africa, Djibouti, Africa, for a period with the Old Guard. I went with the 1st Armored Division to Iraq and spent the majority of my time in Ramadi. And I went to the Paktika province, namely the city of Ghazni, with the 101st Airborne Division.
Let's talk about the experiences that you had in combat.
Sure. And just to give a little bit of context to this, so my platoon was tasked with being one of the first service members to get into the city of Ramadi before the initial invasion took place. Myself and a few other my platoon members were trained as snipers. I went to sniper school in Fort Benning, graduated that, and was able to apply my trade in the city of Ramadi. So basically, what I'd like to share with you about this particular incident is something that kind of sticks with you. It sticks with your brain. It sticks in your brain. It's something that I took home with me, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there, veterans, who have similar experiences that they came home with. But basically, I was in a house. I was providing a tactical overwatch over an intersection of 2 main roads that led into the city. And my task for that particular mission was to ensure that there were no roadside bombs or improvised explosive devices placed on the road in advance of the initial invasion into the city by fellow members of my division and regiment. So I'm sitting in this house It's hot. There's no air conditioning. It's kind of boring. I'm just sitting at a makeshift table. I have my M24 sniper rifle in front of me, and I'm looking at the road. And all of a sudden, the road, which was once lively, is now just like a ghost town. There's nobody around there. And all the training that you get coming into Iraq says if something's not doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, something probably isn't right. And that kind of made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Everybody just disappeared until I see this small kid. I don't know how old he was, 6, 7, 8. And he was pushing this big, heavy cardboard box down the middle of the street, pushing it towards the intersection. So I get a look at him through my binoculars and I let people know, hey, I think something's going on. So I start giving an incident report, basically letting everybody know what's going on. And at this point, to me, there's an IED in this box, and I'm faced with a terrible decision of what do I do with this? So I get behind my rifle and I look through the scope and I have my crosshairs on him. And I look over to my platoon sergeant and say, what do I have to do here? And he doesn't respond to me. So I get back on my rifle scope. My whole world basically is this child pushing a box in the middle of my crosshairs. I took my safety off and I started to squeeze the trigger to release that slack. And thankfully, out of nowhere, I'm assuming this kid's mother came, slapped him in the back of the head, picked up this box, threw it off of the road, and drug him back inside. And I know we talked about it, and I kind of mentioned it at the beginning of this. That's something that sticks with you. That's something that you just don't shake off. That's something that follows you home. It gets into your dreams. I still think about that from time to time today.
Let's back up a little bit. When you say the street became a ghost town, if you will, right? It was devoid of bodies, people just vacated the area. And then you see a little child coming into the street. Was that strategy used by the insurgency?
Yes, the training that you get before you arrive into your theater of operation, you go through training to kind of look for signs that have been and patterns that have been noticed by intelligence community and other troops that came before you. And to me, that was a just textbook style of sign. Where the street was full of life before, people doing what people do, just talking, conducting business, walking around. The street was an active street. And then literally in probably a 15-second time period, all that activity stopped. No one was on the street anymore. There was no movement. There was no conversation except for this one little child.
Yeah, thank you for that. And also, I want to make sure that people understand why it is that you and your fellow service members or the platoon were manning these combat outposts, if you will. You guys were there for the purpose of saving or protecting not just a civilian life, but also the American and Allied forces that were operating in those areas in order to bring civility and peace and stop the killing and atrocities that were occurring in that city or in those areas of those outposts. Am I right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when I say my task was to conduct overwatch over these two main roads, and that was going to be one of the main thoroughfares where our supply trucks, our tanks, our troops, it was a supply line. This road was very close to a river, and on one side we had a level of control. In the side I was on, overwatching was basically a lawless land. Insurgents had free reign; they could come and go, do as they please, and the citizenry kind of had to put up with it. So my task was to ensure that we had the ability to use this road free of as much danger as possible. It's very hard to ensure that, but my job was for in advance of our initial push in the city to legitimize the government, establish the rule of law back into the city, was to ensure that as the troops pushed into the city, they weren't met with an unexpected improvised explosive device or any other type of um, hostile acts that may endanger their lives. And you brought up a good point too. A lot of the citizenry in that city, they were just living their life. They just happened to be caught in a very bad place, and a lot of times they um, would be affected by what the insurgency would try to provoke a fight from us, and how that worked. So yeah, it really was to protect them. It was to protect us, and to try and push out that extremist insurgent element from the city.
So let's move forward, if you don't mind. So you serve in Iraq for how long?
It was somewhere around, I want to say 13, 14 months.
It's a long time, man.
Yeah, let me tell you, it wasn't good news when we told that we were getting extended for, I forget what the period of time was, maybe like 60 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, something like that. But yeah, we got there in the January timeframe of 2006, and I believe I got back to my post in Germany in February, March of 2007. When we got back from Iraq, when I got back from Afghanistan, the in between time, there was a very um, masculine macho culture, and that lends itself to not showing weakness, not admitting you're hurting, not seeking help. I'm strong enough, I'm capable enough, I can do anything. And a lot of that time was involved drinking. Alcohol was my particular drug of choice, and I would drink a lot, a lot,
Were you
very
doing
often.
it to ease the pain?
Yeah, that was the point of my drinking. I would, um, it was part of the lifestyle, and then I would have some type of triggering event. Um, and the easiest way to make that hurt stop was to grab a bottle of liquor and drink that bottle of liquor. And that went on until I separated from the military. And I elected at that point to um, pursue a disability claim with the VA after my service contract was completed. And I went to my appointment and spoke with the VA doctors. And I think a lot of what I knew, I joined the military in all through my 20s. That was my life. And I lived and I breathed it like a lot of people do. So when I had a doctor asking me, "Are you okay? What's wrong with you?" Nothing. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Because that was the culture that I knew, and that's the answer that I knew was going to make me seem strong and capable. So I dismissed a lot of the things that they may have asked me, because I thought, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I have all 10 fingers and all 10 toes. But what I didn't know in the subsequent 15, 17 years or whatever it was that I was dealing with was post-traumatic stress disorder, among other things. I didn't know what it was. Sure, they talked about it in the military, and maybe you had to fill out some paperwork saying, I think I have it, or no, I don't have it, but I didn't know what it was. It was just through my lack of knowledge that I thought, this is par for the course. I was asked to do this job, and I was happy to do it, but the remnants of, like, the story I told you, among others, um, they stayed with me. And even though I was a civilian and working my civilian life, these memories and these feelings and these thoughts still stayed with me. And those coping mechanisms, that alcohol use, continued to be my go-to, as opposed to actually addressing it.
When you're talking about triggers, you're triggering memories, right? That were uncomfortable. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. For me, what it would be is I would be drinking or drunk, and it the trauma of it and the feeling of it kind of became its own addiction for me. I would seek out uh, documentaries over the internet, or I would rewatch old videos, or I would try and find combat footage, and it would start this downward spiral for me. I would watch these troops in contact and other sorts of war footage. And then I would start to think about the stuff that I've done, the people that I knew who were hurt, the people I knew who unfortunately were killed in action.
Mm.
And then I would drink more. And then I would find more things to watch. And then I would drink more. And then I would find more things to watch. That started to spill over to when I wasn't drinking. Watching, war movies. I know that sounds very stereotypical, but I need to stay away from that stuff because I get that tight feeling in your chest, and I clench my jaw and clench my fists, and I start to feel like I'm back there. But this was all undiagnosed. I knew that there was something different, with what I was feeling, but I didn't know what it was. And that carried on for a long, long time.
So we talked about the demons, right? Let's talk about now the 180-degree turn where you realize, and you just said it, something's not right. And internally, you actually consciously decide, hey, I need to make a change here. And I want to go in a different direction, which is where you're headed now, which I totally congratulate you, brother, because you are a success story. So tell us a little bit about this quick turn and where you're headed now and why you're headed there.
After my life in the military, I decided I would be a police officer. So I served my community in that respect, and that kind of continued to activate this trauma cycle that I had where I would experience things, and one thing led to another, and I ended up getting arrested for a drunk driving charge. And further down the road, I was arrested a second time for an assaultive and property damage crime. And I called up a friend of mine from Iraq who was also a police officer and said, hey, man, this is what's going on with me. But my focus was to save my job, really not to get help, because I'm fine, right? There's nothing wrong with me. And thank God I called this person, because he was dealing with the same things I was dealing years prior. So he was a voice of reason and basically convinced me to get help. And that took the form of a rehab facility that treats first responders and military members with their trauma as well as their addictions. And when I was there, again, there's nothing wrong with me, so I don't need to be here. I'm just trying to save my job. I had this chance encounter with a fellow veteran and fellow law enforcement officer who was struggling in his own life and sought out treatment. And he saw me and kind of saw my disinterest in the whole process. And long story short, he asked me why I was there, and I told him, and he said, cool, man, that's awesome. I didn't really get it. How is it awesome that I'm here? How is it awesome I'm probably going to get fired? How is it awesome my life's falling apart? And he told me about his experiences, and they were very similar, except for one thing, where I had some legal issues and faced the potential of losing my job. He lost his family. His wife and his children divorced him, and he hasn't seen them. He lost his job, and he almost lost his life. He ended up attempting suicide, and luckily he wasn't able to complete it. But that was his turning point. And what he told me was, listen, man, if you can get off the elevator to hell in the third floor, fifth floor, whatever floor you think you're on, and you still have a wife, you still have a job, you still have your life, then that's a pretty good deal. And that was kind of like an aha moment for me. If this guy can tell me all this stuff, and he's telling me to try, listen to the therapist, listen to yourself. Don't just bury this stuff. Kind of get to the bottom of it. And that kind of flipped that light switch for me. And I was like, okay, I'm all the way here. What's the point of me just sitting back and being miserable when maybe the professionals who do this for a living know what they're talking about? Maybe I should listen to them.
Tell us quickly about that.
I leaned into the therapy that was offered at rehab, and that included a lot of trauma-based therapies, stuff like brain spotting or EMDR, and that really tapped in to those core memories and would activate me. And I would start to have those panic attacks, but I was in a safe, controlled environment with a professional who was able to guide me through it. And after I left rehab, I continued that back at my home. And I continued that for a number of months. And what that did for me is it didn't take away the memories, it took away how I feel about those memories. Instead of my body getting amped up to fight or to break down in an emotional mess, I was able to understand that this is something that happened to me. This is something I experienced. It's normal to feel this way. And I learned a lot of strategies on how to self-soothe myself so that when these panic attacks, this activation comes, I can remind myself I am in a safe place and I can overcome these feelings.
Bravo, bravo. And now you're studying to be a social worker, helping other veterans.
Absolutely. I was so impressed with once I opened up to therapy and saw what was available to veterans and first responders in the way of traumatic therapy. I was so impressed with it. I was like, I need to do this because there's a lot of people out there who are veterans, first responders who deal with the trauma of the job or their experiences in the military, and it's left untreated. And I think that the world needs more people who can identify with veterans, first responders, and offer that calming voice and that understanding. And yeah, I made the decision to resign from the police department. I did get my job back after they fired me, but that's neither here nor there. But I made the decision to dedicate myself to serving the veteran and first responder community to get through these battles.
100%. We have been speaking with Chris Wiacek, a fellow American veteran, combat veteran, former police officer, community member who we should take example from and has taught us that his dealing with the impact of war has basically brought him to a point where he's put in a lot of work. He has done some personal reflections. And now he is not only dealing with his impacts, combat, but also helping others. Chris, last seconds here. You have anything else you'd like to share with our community?
I think the thing that I would like to say, because it was hard for me to hear, and it was something that rings true to me. So, trauma has many faces, and if someone in your life wears a uniform or once did, please check on them, because they could be alone. And asking for help is not a weakness, it is a strength. And that single conversation that you have with that person could be the crack that lets the light in.
Couldn't say it any better. On that note, I am Robert Asencio. You have been watching another episode of Bets and Badges. We'd like to thank our producers behind the scene, Anzoni Savala, the Miami's Community News team, Grant Michael Miller, and their cadre of support staff. We can't thank you enough, but you, the audience. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. You can catch us on all major podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeart, YouTube, our betsandbadges.com website, the Miami's Community News Papers.com website. Look forward to speaking with you next time. Thank you.